The second epistle of Peter, often referred to as 2 Peter and written to Peter or in Roman numerals 2 Peter, is a book of the New Testament of the Bible, written in the name of Saint Peter, although the vast majority of modern scholars regard it as pseudepigraphical. 2 Peter quotes from and adapts Jude extensively, identifies Jesus with God, and addresses a threatening heresy which had arisen because the anticipated second coming of Christ had not yet occurred. It is the only New Testament book to treat other New Testament writings as scripture. 2 Peter was one of the last letters included in the New Testament canon and is one of the texts that were in dispute before the canon was finalized. Composition. According to the epistle itself, it was composed by the Apostle Peter, an eyewitness to Jesus' ministry. It criticizes false teachers who distort the authentic apostolic tradition and predicts judgment for them. 2 Peter explains that God has delayed the second coming of Christ so that more people will have the chance to reject evil and find salvation. It calls on Christians to wait patiently for the parousia and to study Scripture. The date of composition has proven to be very difficult to determine. Commentaries and reference books have placed 2 Peter in almost every decade from AD 60 to 160. Most biblical scholars have concluded Peter is not the author, considering the epistle pseudepigraphical. Reasons for this include its linguistic differences from 1 Peter, its apparent use of Jude, possible allusions to 2nd century Gnosticism, encouragement in the wake of a delayed parousia, and weak external support. The questions of authorship and date are closely related. For Petrine authorship to be authentic, it must have been written prior to Peter's death in AD 65 to 67. Further, it goes as far to name the Pauline epistles as scripture, the only time a New Testament work refers to another New Testament work in this way, implying that it postdates them by some time. Chester and Martin say scholars consider the epistle to be written between AD 100 to 150 and so contend that it is pseudepigraphical. For an argument for a late date, see Harris. For of middle date, see Bauckham, who opts for a date between AD 80 to 90 as most probable. For an early date and for a defense of the Apostle Peter's authorship, see Kruger, Zahn, Spitter, Big, and Green. Jeremy Duff argues that the various strands of evidence point towards the period 60-130 CE, with some reason to favor 80-90 CE. Canonical acceptance. Acceptance of the letter into the canon did not occur without some difficulty, however. Nowhere did doubts about the letter's authorship take the form of definitive rejection. The earliest record of doubts concerning the authorship of the letter were recorded by Origen. Though Origen mentioned no explanation for the doubts, nor did he give any indication concerning the extent or location. Donald Guthrie suggests that it is fair to assume, therefore, that he saw no reason to treat these doubts as serious, and this would mean to imply that in his time the epistle was widely regarded as canonical. Origen, in another passage, has been interpreted as considering the letter to be Petrine in authorship, before Origen's time. The evidence is inconclusive. There is a lack of definite early quotations from the letter in the writings of the Apostolic Fathers, though possible use or influence has been located in the works of Clement of Alexandria, Theophilus, Aristides, Polycarp, and Justin. Eusebius professed his own doubts, see also Anti-Legomena, and is the earliest direct testimony of such, though he stated that the majority supported the text, and by the time of Jerome it had been mostly accepted as canonical. Content. In both content and style this letter is very different from 1 Peter. This epistle presciently declares that it is written shortly before the apostle's death. Arguments have been made both for and against this being part of the original text, but this debate largely is centered on the acceptance or rejection of supernatural intervention in the life of the writer. The epistle contains 11 references to the Old Testament. In 3:15-16 a reference is made to one of Paul's epistles, which some have identified as 1 Thessalonians 4:13-5:11. The book also shares a number of passages with the Epistle of Jude, 1-5 with Jude chapter 3, 1-12 with Jude chapter 5, 2-1 with Jude chapter 4, 2-4 with Jude chapter 6, 2-5 with Jude chapter 5, 2-6 with Jude chapter 7, 2-10-11 with Jude chapters 8-9, 2-12 with Jude chapter 10. 2:13-17 with Jude chapters 11-13, 2:18 with Jude chapter 16, 3-2f with Jude 17f, 3-3 with Jude chapter 18, 3:14 with Jude chapter 24, and 3:18 with Jude chapter 25. Because the Epistle of Jude is much shorter than 2 Peter, and due to various stylistic details, the scholarly consensus is that Jude was the source for the similar passages of 2 Peter. Tartarus is mentioned in 2 Pet 2-4 as devoted to the holding of certain fallen angels. It is elaborated on in Jude chapter 6. Jude chapter 6, however, is a clear reference to the Book of Enoch. Bauckham suggests that 2 Peter chapter 2 verse 4 is partially dependent on Jude chapter 6, but is independently drawing on Paranetic tradition that also lies behind Jude 5-7. The Paranetic traditions are in Sirach 16-7-10, Damascus document 2:17-3:12, 3 Maccabees 2-4-7. Testament of Naphtali 3-4-5 and Mishnah Sanhedrin 10-3. Audience. The audience in this book are the various churches in Asia Minor in general. Outline. The letter is usually outlined as follows. Address. Exhortation to Christian virtue. Condemnation of the false teachers. The delay of the second coming. Final exhortation and doxology.